With the release of Metroid Fusion in 2002, the Metroid series wouldn't have a brand new 2D entry until 2021. But before the franchise was almost solely continued by the Prime series in the 2000s, Nintendo had one more Game Boy Advance title for fans to enjoy.
Metroid Zero Mission, the last game in the series to be fully developed by R&D1. I remember one day when I was at one of my local retro game stores, I managed to find this just sitting by its lonesome on one of the shelves. I had to bring it back to get the internal battery replaced, but after that, this was how I experienced the Metroid series fully for the first time. At this point, I did have a Game Boy Advance, but I ended up leaving it at home when I moved to college, so the only way I could play it physically was on my GameCube with the Game Boy player. This was released in 2003 and it lets you play your Game Boy Advance games on the GameCube. And as much as I love this thing, playing Zero Mission with a GameCube controller was painful. The stick just never felt precise enough to me for 2D games, and using the D-pad and try and play it, it was about as appealing as cholera. Like I said, this was the last fully developed Metroid game from R&D1, and by technicality, it was the studio's last project. R&D1 would be absorbed along with R&D2 into the newly created Nintendo Software and Development Division, later being merged into Nintendo's other internal software development division, Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, resulting in Nintendo Entertainment Planning and Development. There are many teams in this branch, but production number 4 is where Yoshio Sakamoto is right now, so I guess it's the closest thing we have to R&D1 nowadays. Sakamoto was the only member from the original Metroid team that had worked on this title, not only being the director, but also the writer. The original plan was to port Super Metroid to the GBA, which, I mean, it made sense. They did it for Super Mario World and A Link to the Past, so why not the Golden Boy of Metroid? Well, Sakamoto ultimately decided to port the first game instead, which led them down the path to eventually making a full-on remake for the first Metroid. Building off of the engine used in Fusion, they remade the first game initially with a more cutesy-looking art style, more so based on the original sprite work from the NES game. I'm glad this was changed though. This was clearly too different from what came before, and I'm sorry, I can't take a Samus with that big of a head seriously. One of Sakamoto's goals for this project was to explore more of Samus's backstory and have an engaging narrative, as Sakamoto believed it was important to have a good story to complement the gameplay itself. They wanted to expand on the story of Samus while still giving it an air of mystery, and I don't think they pulled it off the way that they should have. But we'll touch on that in a second. The end result was Metroid Zero Mission, released on the GBA in February of 2004.
So you guys may be wondering, why didn't I just talk about Metroid Zero Mission in the original Metroid video? Well, it was partially because I wanted to make it feel more of its own thing rather than just being a Metroid 1 remake. And I thought as the first Metroid game that I completed, I wanted to give it its own video to let it shine. But before we even talk about the game, I wanted to discuss the manga that came out around the same time as Zero Mission that sort of does the whole backstory thing better than the game itself.
It pretty much takes what was established about Samus in the Nintendo Power comic and expands on it more. It reestablishes her origin on the mining colony of K2L, but also develops more on that part, revealing that not only did the space pirates attack the colony, but it was Ridley who killed Samus' parents. Afterwards, the Chozo brought Samus to Zebes, injected her with Chozo DNA, and trained her to be the galaxy's protector. She then goes off to the Galactic Federation as a rookie. Not everything from the Nintendo Power comic was carried over. Armstrong isn't a thing, which we're honestly not missing out on much, and it gives Samus more of a chance to be her own character here. Keaton made a return, retaining the same role initially as the chairman of the Federation. I was kinda surprised to see Hardy return as well, but realistically, what did people remember about Hardy?
He's fat!
Now he's just a hard-ass higher-up who gives Samus and her teammates a bit of shit after a mission. Speaking of her teammates, Kreets and Mach, I wanna say? I really like these guys. I like Kreets for how optimistic he can be, and Mach reminds me of Blanca for some reason, but with less zappy zaps. We even get to see Adam Malkovich for the first time, and he's pretty much like how Samus described him in Fusion. And I'm gonna hold on to it as long as I can, considering... yeah. But I also love the world building that this manga attempts to do. The Chozo stopped by Samus' colony to ask for a material called a Floraltite, because they were in the middle of creating the Metroids in order to deal with the threat of the X-Parasites on SR-388. It's kind of a clever way to connect everything, I really like that. We find out at the beginning that Samus does have a home and doesn't exclusively live in her ship, which is kinda neat. And just getting to see how Samus slowly grows up during these intense events in her life just makes me really like her character more after giving this a read. There is a scene in this manga that I'm going to go ahead and save my thoughts on when I play Other M, as I think it'll be more relevant there. But if there's any bit of manga or other supplementary material I recommend you read from the Metroid series, it's definitely this manga. The English translation is a bit hardcore, but I still say give it a read for Samus' swagtastic drip alone. God, I'm a simp.
So what about the actual game itself? Does it attempt to add any new story?
The answer is yes and no.
Zero Mission, for the most part, follows the plot of the original game, just sort of enhancing what was already there. She's still contracted by the Federation to infiltrate Zebes, exterminate the Metroids, and defeat Mother Brain. Lots of new cutscenes were added to give the story a bit more prominence, but everything sort of stays the same until right after Samus escapes Torian. Before even getting out of the planet's atmosphere, Samus is attacked and shot down by space pirates, and now without her power suit and only wielding a stun pistol that kinda blows, Samus now has to infiltrate the space pirate mothership and find a way to get off the planet. Exploring the giant spacecraft eventually leads her to the ruins of Chozodia, where for a brief second, we see a flashback of Samus and her Chozo father figure, Grey Voice, visiting these ruins when she was a child. And that's pretty much it for any new lore added to Samus' backstory. In Metroid Fusion, at least in the Japanese version, certain ending panels revealed in the games for the first time that Ridley and the Space Pirates killed Samus' parents and that the Chozo raised and trained her on Zebes. So really, this whole scene is the only new lore added to the game. I found this interview where Sakamoto said, and I quote, "We've taken this opportunity to explore the backstory a little bit more."
So that was a fucking lie.
Anyway, once she enters this chamber, she undergoes a test from this mural spirit thing, which grants her a fully enhanced power suit, giving her a fighting chance to escape from planet Zebes. I'll talk a little bit more about this part of the game later on. Okay, let's take a pause on the story and actually talk about the gameplay itself. How can I describe Metroid Zero Mission? At its core, it's a remake of Metroid 1. The general layout of all the areas is intact, but many of the repeated room layouts were all redesigned and kept pretty fresh. Brinstar, Norfair, Kraid's Lair, Ridley's Lair, and Torian all return obviously, but Criteria from Super Metroid is here too, though on a bit of a smaller scale. There's also the new area of Chozodia that I'll talk about later. One thing I love about Zero Mission is how Samus controls. She's got most of her movement capabilities from Super Metroid back, like wall jumps can go off one wall again, and you can use the bomb jump too. Actually, this is one of the best bomb jumps in the series. Samus does feel heavier here compared to how she felt in Fusion, leading to a Samus that's easier to pick up and control, but somewhat difficult to master. If you can pull off these abilities, you'll end up with a Samus that debatably has more freedom than any other incarnation of the character. Considering this is Samus' first mission in the series, she does need to collect her powers for the first time again. This of course includes the Morph Ball, missiles, Morph Ball bombs, the high jump, the ice and wave beams, the Variosuit, and oh my god, the fucking long beam again?! And Zero Mission not only brings back the Metroid 1 power-ups, but brings in all the major upgrades she got in Metroid 2 and Super Metroid, like the Charge Beam, the Jump Ball, the Speed Booster, and the Super Missiles. You'll also find a few of these mysterious items that initially aren't compatible with Samus' suit. I mean, I get it, I don't want to upgrade to Windows 11 either, but I want my cool power-ups, bro. Whenever you grab one of these, though, it does play one of my favorite jingles in the entire series. There are hundreds of scenarios I could see this working in.
Alright guys, I'm pushing point.
Think it's going for the healers?
I'm gonna dive into their back line.
And I'm dead again.
Punisher's out.
They're pushing point. Move back a bit.
Where's everyone at?
Anyone got an ult?
On top of new areas and power-ups, new mini-bosses also hide in the depths of Zebes. There's Diorum, who's... oh, he's dead. Well, there's Acid Worm, who's also dead. Huh. Well, Kraid's here, and he's not only bigger, but he's... oh. Okay, come on. Kirigiro has got to have something, right? What do you mean he's already dead? Imago can be a bit... oh, for fuck's sake. Ridley can be a bit... oh my god. Yeah, most of the bosses are piss easy in this game. I mean, if anything, I guess if you're a new player, then this could be a good starting point for you, but for the returning crowd, don't get too excited, boys. The only boss that gave me any sort of trouble was Mother Brain, and even then, it wasn't even because of her, it was because of the drones and the Rinkas. The route you follow in Zero Mission is pretty much a streamlined version of the original route in the first game, but it comes with all the modern additions of the series up until this point. Each area has a map room that'll help give you an idea of your surroundings, and there are these empty Chozo statues that'll point you in your next general direction, either after getting a new ability or taking out one of the major bosses. But you're never straight up told your goal, that's for you to figure out. It's sort of a blend between the non-linear exploration of Super Metroid and the more linear style of Metroid Fusion. A good balance that I can get behind. One thing I love about Zero Mission is how much freedom the developers give to the player, especially when it comes to sequence breaking. You can follow the original route just fine, but you can do things like grab the Variosuit early with bomb jumps. There are even developer-sanctioned shortcuts added that let you go to Ridley's Lair first like you could do in the first game. But there are tons of things like that all over the game. You can even get things like the screw attack early if you know where to look, and just having the option and the choice to do so makes for an extremely rewarding experience. What doesn't feel like a rewarding experience is the last part of the game. Oh my god, why does Chozodia exist? Okay, I think I'm being a bit dramatic. Chozodia itself is fine, and if anything, it's sort of its own SAX-like section of the game. Without her suit, Samus is the most frail she's ever been, taking up almost a tank or so from each space pirate hit. You really don't have any other option but running away. Almost getting caught in a pirate's line of sight is the same kind of thrill as the SAX, but it kind of goes away when these dumb fucks will kill each other or jump into the void in an attempt to reach Samus. But going for 100% makes me not like this area, because guess what? 100% in this game is somehow worse than Fusion. So remember those 3 mystery power-ups you collect through the main story? Well, when you get to the deepest parts of Chozodia, this Chozo ghost thing will put Samus through a sort of trial, and upon completion, Samus gets a brand new power suit, this time with the shoulder pads, and this suit is compatible with the new items being the gravity suit, the space jump, and the plasma beam. After this, you feel like an utter badass, ripping and tearing through the space pirate threat, exploring more of the ship, and even finding power bombs, which there are thankfully much less of in Zero Mission. But this is the part of the game I never enjoy, since now you have the option of going back to the previous areas to get the items you missed. But the problem is that everything is so out of the way, even more so than what it was in Fusion. Most of the time you're only going back to certain regions to grab like one missile expansion or power bomb, and then it's off to the next area. And Zero Mission somehow has both better and worse Shine Spark puzzles. This one right here being a major flick in the nuts. You have this missile block right before a jump with the speed booster that is a 3-frame window to make the jump through these speed booster blocks.
You know, tuberculosis sounds really appealing right now.
Something I do like though is that getting 100% actually does impact the last part of the game, as before she can escape, Samus encounters this robotic recreation of Ridley. If you don't bother going after all the items, this thing is a chump, but with 100% completion, Mecha Ridley becomes the hardest boss in the game, possibly even the hardest final boss in the franchise. If anything is worth going after 100%, I'd say this would be it. Once Mecha Ridley drops, the self-destruction sequence from the mothership activates and Samus hauls ass to one of the space pirate ships to make her escape, but not before running this guy over with little to no remorse. The mothership explodes and Samus heads off from Zebes with her Zero Mission complete. Looking at the graphics, I think that the team once again did a good job, but I think overall the presentation can sometimes be a step down from Fusion. I think a big reason for that is Samus' running animation, not the sprites themselves, but how fast they play in the animation. With how fast she moves, it looks like she should be picking up more speed, you know? And the whole time it just looks so goofy. As far as everything else goes, it's the quality I expect from a GBA game. Environments are nicely drawn, the backgrounds are super detailed, and the enemies and bosses look incredible. Samus herself does look great in this game, and this was also the title to properly introduce the Zero Suit. I dig the idea, and I think the whole ensemble works great for Samus. The game does have a few unapologetic ass shots, which, hey, I ain't gonna complain. Maybe it's just the man in me talking, but I don't mind how Samus looks in this game. My only real critique is that I wish she had some more muscle on her bones. She's a badass warrior piloting a heavy-ass power suit. Where's the six-pack, damn it? The shorts and vest outfit you see after beating the game 100% looks great too, and it's one of my favorite costumes for Samus in Smash Bros. The sound design isn't as in-your-face as it is in Fusion, but there's something about how missiles sound in this game that just does something for me. Musically speaking, it's pretty good. We got some great updated pieces from the first game, as well as some new tracks and remixes from other games in the series. Metroid Zero Mission is the de facto Metroid experience for me. No matter how many times I play this title, I never get sick of it. I love this game's flow, the level design, the exploration, Samus' moveset. It all culminates into something I can experience time and time again without getting exhausted. Sure, the game's difficulty and trouble of going for 100% are strikes against it, but these strikes don't bother me too much at the end of the day. Not enough to keep me from saying that this is one of my favorite games in the series. If you're looking to get into the Metroid series, I believe that this is the title you should pick up and play for yourself. It's easy to pick up and play, and if you're worried about missing out on the story, well, it's a remake of the first game in the series, so you're all good. Either way, if you decide to pick this game up, I hope you have a good time.
It's kind of hard to believe that we're approaching the end of the marathon, but I'm really happy with how these videos have turned out so far, and I hope you guys are enjoying them too, but we all know what game is next. Go on. Make your move. Well, it looks like I'm going to be here for a while, so the next time we meet, I'll be taking a look at Metroid Other M. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all, and it's gone. Shit.